We just finished an experiencer panel, which really is at the heart of the matter. But that's I say there's an offense and defense if we're talking about UFOs and disclosure and all that. And the defense is the government. The offense is the experiencers and going out there and sharing what's there. But I have a really great cast of panelists here today who are deep into the topic. I can't actually think of anyone, but there probably are people deeper or as deep into this. So let me start with Grant Cameron. His White House UFO studies on each president in the US revealed that we are deeply connected to this phenomena for probably more than 75 years. It goes back. Grant tracks history, and he's also but he's also opened up to the other levels, that it's not just about the ships, it's about us, it's about consciousness, and we'll get into that a little. And thanks, Grant, for being here. And then we have my good friend Carolyn Corey, who directed, produced a movie called A Tear in the Sky. Can you tell us a little bit about what the tear in the sky means, Carolyn?
It means we found a wormhole in a nutshell. Well, it's a scientific investigation of UFOs, which hasn't been done before in this way. There's been scientific studies of film and videos, but not an actual expedition. So that's what the film is about, to show how, with the proper instrumentation, the proper setup, the proper technology, we can capture UFOs, and we did in 5 days. So that's what the subject of the film is, which I think is revolutionary because it's never been done before.
It's a fantastic film. Of course, you get guest appearance by William Shatner and Michio Kaku. I recommend it. And then we have my old friend, Michael Mannion. Thanks, Michael, for being here.
Go ahead. Thanks for the invite.
And Michael runs the mindshiftinstitute.org. Actually, I think I met John Mack through some of the talks that you sponsored back in the day.
Yeah, 25 years ago.
Yes,
Wow.
That's major. And Michael has a very important event coming up on the 12th. I'm going to do a little screen share of that. Let me just screen share that. And here this is, you see that on your screen there? Is that on the screen?
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, it's called The Next Step, the Unitary Approach to Planetary Emergence, Personal, Sociological, Ecological. Can you talk about why you are doing this event on March 12th in New York City?
Yeah, we're doing it at the New York Academy of Medicine on 103rd and 5th. And what we're looking at is, it was in 1956 that Wilhelm Reich made his appeals to the Supreme Court to try to prevent them from burning and banning his books. And very few people know what he actually told the Supreme Court in those appeals that he made. And three of the major things that he was telling them are all hot topics and subjects now. And the speakers that are at our event, Ralph Blumenthal, the New York Times, and Rudy Schild, and then 3 weather engineers, are all doing work that Reich told the Supreme Court was coming. The reality of the extraterrestrial presence, a new view of the universe and our place in it, and using the Orgone energy weather engineering technology to help us combat desertification, forest death, drought, floods, and other aspects of extreme climate change. So that's what we mean by the planetary emergency. And the reason it's personal, societal, and ecological is that we have to change as human beings to become people who are capable of understanding and using the mass-free energy that fills the universe technologically, so that we can address the various crises we face. So you can't just use it like mechanistic technology. because it involves the subjective and the objective. You have to feel what you're doing, and you have to be in emotional contact with it in order to do it. And so we have people who are, I'm going to give a presentation, and Trish on the overall picture, Trish Corbett, my wife and partner in this. And then Ralph Blumenthal and Rudy Schild and Dr. Connie Hutzsteiner, Dr. Stefan Simonian, and Dr. Roberto Maglione, who'll be remote from Italy. They're all going to talk about their work, but their work is what Reich was telling the Supreme Court about in 1956. They didn't listen to him. They're the court that approved the burning of the mass psychology of fascism, the burning of the function of the orgasm, right as they expanded the definition of obscenity to allow all kinds of other books to be published. They burned Reich's writings on human sexuality, and they burned books like Cosmic Superimposition, and which showed the beginning of this new view of the universe and our place in it. So we think it's a very exciting conference, and it's unlike anything else that I know of in recent years. And it's in person at the New York Academy of Medicine, but we're also offering it free via live streaming on YouTube.
You can go to mindshiftinstitute.org, go under events. That is Saturday, November 12th. And yeah, we'll go deeper into those subjects. But you know, Reich would do these, what are those machines he made that would attract UFOs? These,
well, and that's not really it, Alan. He had a device that he used to influence the energy field of the planet.
Mhm.
At the time, two groups were interested in observing his work. One was the United States Air Force, and the other were extraterrestrials. So he didn't invent devices to attract UFOs. UFOs were attracted to his work, and the devices that he created had an influence on the energy field, and that was the energy that he believed that the craft were using.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, thank you, Michael. We'll get more into Reich's work too, and that was the beginning. Well, not the beginning, but that was part of the crackdown and not allowing the understanding of consciousness to really be a part of this new discovery, a new way.
Yeah, and you know, and back in the 50s, you know, Reich only lived a few years into the modern UFO era, and he really only learned about it in 52, 53 from early books back then, like The Flying Saucers Have Landed by Adamski and Major Donald Kehoe's books. The only other scientist who was speaking out back then was James McDonald. You know, so the two of them were pretty alone. And, you know, even the people who were followers of Reich's therapeutic work, they didn't go with him on this. They were kind of embarrassed by it. Right. But, you know, it's 65 years later and times are changing.
Well, that's why we're here today. Thanks, Michael. And that's November 12th at the Academy of Medicine up on 103rd and 5th. And you get tickets at mindshift.org. And we'll come back to you. Melinda Leslie has been on the scene talking about some of the things Grant's new book is about, flying UFOs and your experiences, but you're also talking about what's happening inside government, right? You're also following the whole disclosure movement. And where are we right now in the disclosure, according to your research?
Oh, goodness.
That's a
loaded first question.
Oh, I know, because there's so much happening every day. What have you picked up on lately? It was supposed to be a big drop.
Yeah, well, there is a lot going on. I took you guys a ton of notes, so I'd be prepared for today. So I could, you know, if I jump into it, I'd be an hour right now, and I don't do that at the beginning of the call, obviously. But for one major thing is, first off, yes, we're supposed to. The classified report happened. That went to. I'll just give a very brief right now. I know much more data, but I'll go with this. Classified report went to Congress, to the House and Senate, and And that happened on time, or at the last minute, as you know, as the case may be, on the 31st of October. And we are supposed to be getting a public report. Insider accounts are saying, and if you guys know differently, Grant may know, he can correct me, but or even Carolyn, you might know. My understanding is a public report will come out before the end of the week, so any day now or early next week. I'm hearing both accounts. Some people are saying it'll be Monday or Tuesday. Some people are saying it'll be, probably Friday. So we'll see. That is the public report. And everyone is, armchair quarterbacking in the UFO community, trying to kind of second guess this thing. There's been a rash of recent articles. One very negative one, I'm sure you guys are well aware of, in the New York Times, and then a bunch of very positive supporting ones. I can get more into that, but basically what we're hearing from apparently people leaking information to these journalists is that it's 50% explained and 50% unexplained sightings that has been being gathered in this report. And of course, this report was the Gillibrand Amendment in last year's NDAA, National Defense Authorization Act, and or this year's, I should say, it was approved the end of last year, and so this year's meeting, 2022, NDAA said that they had to produce this yearly report, and it's had to be submitted to Senate and the Congress. I'm not sure that there was any promise for public one, but we are told that we will get a public one like we did last June, which I believe was the last one. And so again, in the NDAA, let me see here. There are 22 pages, 366 cases listed is what we're hearing. And we'll get the public one right away. I could go into more, but that's the basics. And then Grant and I, real quick, are working on together. We have kind of, right, Grant, we've kind of joined up in his release of the Oak Shannon notes in support of the Wilson Davis notes. So that's kind of a subset of the disclosure process that's going on. Last May, read into the record was the Wilson Davis notes. We'll probably get more into that. But Grant and I have been researching the history of the working group. And their first meeting, Grant had Oak Shannon's notes from that meeting. I had Jack Houck's, and we released them together. Mine were really supporting his, so it's really more about the Shannon notes. But Jack had the outline for that original meeting in '85. And why is that important? Because Oak Shannon's mentioned in Wilson Davis, and he recently went public for Project Unity with Jay Anderson about his involvement in that, and backing up that the quotes attributed to Admiral Wilson that Shannon said were in fact accurate, that he said, I said those, I had those meetings with the Admiral, and why he couldn't make a claim to whether the meeting between Dr. Eric Davis and the Admiral happened. He could make claims that everything the Admiral was being quoted as saying about him were accurate.
Well,
and so we went public with documentation to support what was Oak Shannon's involvement in that. And as I said, Grant and I and others, my research associate, Randy Kopang, and I for years have been researching the history of the working group. So I've been following disclosure to the, what can I say, to the nth degree for many years.
I know you have, and that's why I wanted you here. But before we go,
Thank you, by the way, for having me here. I'm very honored. Thank you, Ellen. I appreciate it.
This document and Grant, but after I just wanted, we talked about Kristian Gillibrand and Osborn Franco here. Had a personal up close interaction with Gillibrand, and I think I was surprised how enthusiastic she actually was about this topic. Anything you want to say before we show the video, Ozzy?
Well, let's show the video first, and then I can ask
and other people, I love other people to comment, because
real quick, I just want to say, Osvaldo, thank you. Of course, I've already seen it online, and everyone, this is really important, because Gillibrand was the kind of the lead behind the Gillibrand Amendment, and one of the chief proponents in Congress about this current disclosure project going on, or disclosure. Now the new legislation for this year, we can get more into that later. But anyways, I just wanted to thank you for being courageous enough to approach her and do what you did. Thank you. Here we go.
Well, thank
Yeah.
you for being Melinda Leslie and doing all you've done for all these
Oh,
years.
you're so sweet. Thank you.
You know, I thought she was just a politician, just saying, yeah, to get votes, but she seems pretty sincere. So let me see if I can
Yeah.
screen share this here. Okay, do you see this on? This is, it's a strange angle looking at the feet, but listen to what she has.
Sorry about that.
Okay, here we go.
Senator Gillibrand, I want to thank you on behalf of so many of my friends and colleagues for your UAP reform support. Yes. When I have some questions. When can we expect a public hearing regarding UFOs and UAPs, specifically with these reforms in place?
I'm supposed to get a report in the next, I think, month or two.
Yes, ma'am.
They increased our staff, but it wasn't very significant. Not a lot of information. They're building the office right now, and they understand what the mission is. So I met the guy who's in charge of the office. He understands he's supposed to work in the private sector, and all the people who have all the data and information. He's also asked to go back and look at all of the archival data. He's not been able to get access to it because, as you can imagine, it's probably siloed and all sorts of
Yes, ma'am, it is.
And so his job is to try to get access to all of it. And if he can't, I said just go forward. If you can't get the historic stuff, get what's in the private sector, get the private sector data like FAA data, correlate it, investigate all the other things that are current, and just create a state-of-the-art office. And he's committed, and they're taking it seriously. They're not going to hide it because there's so many of us now on the Intel Committee and Armed Services that we're going to stand by the service members who documented this stuff. They have video, they have radar, they have heat sensors, they have everything.
Materials.
They have it. So I'm not going to let it go. I'm 100% committed, and if you have information you want to help,
Yes, I do, very much so.
Your card.
Yes, ma'am. I would very much like to. Also, can I interview you? I'm trying to do a public affairs show about this. Thank you so much.
2 days ago.
You. Oh, that was from the UFO Jesus website. But anyway, do you want to explain that a little bit, and then I'll get a reaction? Because also Caroline, of course, documented heat sensors, radar, all that in her film. But what I was surprised how sincere she was. But what was the follow-up to that, Ozzy?
Well, I had another meeting with Senator Gillibrand.
Oh,
I
good.
have not released the video yet. Basically, I'm very impressed with Senator Gillibrand. Gillibrand is awesome. She's done a fantastic job. She is very enthusiastic. Very enthusiastic. In fact, the video shows how enthusiastic she is.
Yeah.
The second one. Like very encouraging. There's good stuff coming out of this. This isn't over, not by a long shot. During that meeting with her, I gave her some documents. I don't know if any of you have heard of Forsaken Poseidon.
No. What's it? What did you say? What's it called?
Pardon me, Poseidon Forsaken.
No, I don't know.
It is a document that was given to me by my friend Christopher Wolford, and basically it's some very important stuff that's actionable, and I gave that to Senator Gillibrand with some other documents and papers from other associates of mine that pertain to this matter.
So what do you think of the upshot? When is she actually going to take some action, do you feel?
Let's wait and see what's going on. Again, like we're getting delays, but there's more that's going on with this.
Okay.
Let's say that from my experience with Senator Gillibrand, there are a lot of people that are saying like a lot of negative things about this, but that's not my experience. Like all of my interactions with Senator Gillibrand have been very, very positive in regards to this, which is, a relief.
Yeah, Melinda.
Oswaldo, could you tell us a little bit about that document you gave to her that you got from, you said it was from Christopher Wolford, you said?
Yes.
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit about what the nature of that is? I'm not familiar with this.
It basically it's basically a list of who's doing what.
Okay.
You know, and why we say they're doing what, and you know, reasons to believe, actionable information in
Doing
regards
what
to
in terms of,
like who's basically playing, who's holding the cards with this, you know, who is actually like involved in this at very high levels.
Just curious, is it, this is either a yes or no question. Is it that same one that was known to be put out by Dr. Stephen Greer quite a while back?
I don't think so. This
Okay,
is not
just curious.
Anyway,
yeah,
we'll
I'm not a Greer person.
as well. We'll come back to you about the Gary Nolan work you're doing, but let's go to Grant. Grant, what do you think of what Gillibrand actually was as a person and her interest here?
Well, I think the first thing people have to realize who Gillibrand is and how she got into politics. Hillary Clinton left her Senate seat to go to the State Department, and she was appointed by the Hillary Clinton people to take Hillary Clinton's seat. She ran for president in 2020, and she was backed by Hillary Clinton. If you look at John Podesta's stuff about his donations, you'll see John Podesta made a lot of donations to Gillibrand's committee. So that may be why she's so hyped up on UFOs, because she knows Podesta and she knows Hillary. And
I think she was briefed by Podesta about it. Was she briefed on that? Because Podesta's really into it.
well, no, we don't know that, but we know that John gave contributions to her campaign numerous times while she was running. If you look at his contributions, they're all online. So it would be like, you know, that they were backing her and they put her in there and stuff. And so she's friends with Hillary Clinton, and Hillary Clinton was the one that talked her into running for president. So there's this very close connection as to who she is, and the fact that Hillary and Podesta are both very into UFOs. So it makes sense that they have talked to her about this issue and maybe told her to get in the front and take control of the thing, so you get credit for it before anybody else does. And so that's maybe why she jumped on it. I think Osvaldo asked the right question. I'm not sure it's going to happen, and that is the question is, when are we going to get public hearings? The first report that we got back was worse than Blue Book. In Blue Book, you had all the reports. You knew what the reports were. You knew what the sightings were. You knew what the shapes of the crafts were. And what did we get from the first? They said there was 144 sightings, one that they could identify. In the 143, we can't tell you anything about them. What's the shape? It's classified. What's the sighting? Oh, it's classified. And this has all gone into the black world. And I think the same thing's going to happen in the second report. It's going to be the same thing. It's going to be, we got half these things are explained. These are classified. We can't talk about it. And basically, it's an initiative to get all this material gathered from all the different agencies for the Department of Defense and their national insecurity budget. And I don't think it's going to come public. The question is, when do we have public hearings, and are we actually going to get any of this material? Because I quoted to you yesterday, I was talking to you, Alan, about what Eric Walker had told us, and he knew what was going on. He said, why should we change the rules to satisfy your curiosity? And I would say that in behind the scenes, the people who are holding the cards are saying this is just people's curiosity. This is classified information, top secret stuff that we need to build weapons and take on Russia and China and who knows who else. And they're not going to identify it. They're not going to give it. I mean, so we've got Blue Book where we actually knew the shapes. These, they won't even tell you the shapes, like what's classified about the shape of the stuff that they're getting. And they're basically releasing nothing. Blue Book was way ahead of what we're having here. And again, when it comes down to the sighting stuff, who cares to me about the sightings? It says, yeah, something's going on. There's no indication that they're going to look at contactees and what the contactees are being told, or this book that I just put out where I've got 36 people who've flown the craft and they're all saying the same thing. And 14% of people in the free survey said they've flown the craft. And I think it's time when we get away from the sighting stuff. But I think this is a black world thing where everything's going in the black world. And I admire the question, when are we going to have public hearings? But I think that's a long way off, that they'll block that. They're going to have all these hearings with Eric Davis and people, but it's all going to be behind classified, behind closed doors, and we're never going to hear about it.
Well, that's too bad. You know, just want to bring Caroline, you know, you have the data in your film. You
yeah. Well,
yeah.
Sorry. Well, yeah, I just want to say at the time when actually we were in production, Senator Gillibrand was actually in contact with, because the scientists who are in the movie are University of Albany, New York. And so at one point, they were in contact with each other, and I was also in the loop to try to communicate with her. So she was very aware of what we were doing, the scientists, going out there and doing it live. And she was very supportive. She was actually willing. I was trying to, but she came in, we were already at the end of production, and I had already kind of wrapped the production. I was going to interview her. But at the time, like I said, she was aware and very supportive, and she was saying that's what we need. And so, but I ended up not interviewing her at the time because she was going to be like the last, anyway, it wasn't going to work or match whatever. So that's what I know from her angle. But what I want to say in terms of classification and stuff like that, since in 5 days, we went to this one location and we were able to capture on camera through multiple devices, multiple angles, triangulation, hundreds of hours of data. So people say, was that luck? How many people, go on an expedition and then come back empty-handed? I don't think it's luck. I think what happened is that we happened to have proper instrumentation. Most of the stuff was captured on FLIR. The FLIR is not regular night vision infrared. It's a much larger spectrum. It's almost military scale. And so this means that you don't see it with the naked eye, but you see it through these devices. So we had all these devices and all this technology running 24/7, but only in 5 days. And we captured not only the typical orbs or whatever stuff that they see, but we captured things that behaved exactly like the Tic Tacs. We also captured things literally falling down in the water at 50,000 miles an hour, something ridiculous. We captured things popping out of nowhere, rotating, appearing, disappearing, all with the FLIR. And then at the end, that big thing that we're calling a wormhole, for people who have not seen the movie, and again, to remind everyone, the scientists who worked in the movie are hardcore scientists. I mean, these aren't guys who are they kept saying our reputation, like they're putting themselves out there. But that was a good thing, because these aren't the kind of scientists who are going to look at something and say, oh, it's a UFO, oh, it's an extraterrestrial. I mean, they were basically debunking themselves, as we would capture something, they'd be like, maybe it's a camera glitch. That's the first thing we look at, like people who say, oh, it's a camera glitch. Don't you think that's the first thing we look at? It's not a camera glitch. It's not a radiation effect. If it's a radiation effect, well, basically, just for people who did not watch the film, we recorded basically some sort of cloud that opened and closed. It's not an atmospheric event, because if it was an atmospheric event, a cloud, we calculated the speed at which it opened and closed, and it was 700 miles an hour. There is no cloud that moves 700 miles. So it's not an atmospheric event. It's not. Then these scientists are so before they come out and say something, they work with NASA, they work with ERNI, with Fermi, with every single organization that could potentially explain, maybe it's electromagnetic anomaly, maybe it's some sort of solar flare that's doing some weird thing. Long story short, after checking every single possible explanation, to date, there is not one scientist or debunker for that matter, who is able to tell us what this thing is. Then after the movie was over, the scientists also presented at SCU. There was a big conference there, 200 scientists, experts from all areas. Again, atmosphere, right? You were there. Atmospheric science, again, space science, whatever, all kinds of different disciplines. And nobody can tell us. Some of it could potentially explain, some of it's like maybe water vapor or blah, 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 but nothing can explain both, because out of this cloud thing were physical objects. And the radar picks up on reflective objects that were measured, by the way. They were about 35 to 50 feet each. There's about 50 of them. So it doesn't pick up on light, doesn't pick up on radiation, picks up on reflective objects. Also, we had a huge gamma burst exactly at that time. All of this to say this is an anomaly, no matter how you look at it. So 2 points here. One is that in 5 days, we not only were able to collect hundreds of hours of data, but we collected anomalies that haven't even been seen before because we had the proper equipment. So that you can't tell me the government can't, with their radar, $1 million radar, $1 million satellite system, you can't tell me they don't know how to collect data or they don't have data. Come on, we're civilians. With the proper equipment, we capture this. This is number one. The second thing, after the film was over, we continued, the scientists continued to say, what else can we find out about this thing? We don't want it to be this way or that way. We just want to know what it is, right? And so we continue to research, to try to get more data. And so we said, let's try to get satellite images. So we contact every single satellite imaging organization out there, private, government, every possible potential thing. Either they didn't have it or they didn't want to give it to us. Then we file a FOIA request. We're like, now they're going to have to tell us. So this is official. We get a letter back saying we are the United States government official satellite recording agencies or whatever. I mean, it's in the letter. And we do have, because by the way, people who will watch the movie, we know exactly where that opening is. We have the size, we have the location, we have the speed, we have the angle. So we know exactly where it was recorded. People can watch how we figure that out in the movie. So we give that information through the FOIA request and we say, this is the date, the time, the location, blah, 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 give us the satellite images. And so long story short, they say we do have the satellite images, but you can't have them because that particular place, that particular time and coordinate, that data is classified.
Well, yeah, of course. But I just want to comment that if you can get that in 5 days, imagine what the government actually has after 75 years.
That's my point. You can't, that's one of the things that this movie proved, that we as civilians, I have to say, we did have a huge amount of equipment. And also the type of equipment was pretty sophisticated, versus a typical person out there with the night vision. That was the idea of the movie too, but it's still in 5 days. I mean, hundreds of hours, so you can't tell me as civilians we can do it. Don't tell the government can't. It's like embarrassing to say we don't have anything,
right?
Or we don't, or the images is not clear, or whatever, or we can't tell from the video. We're triangulating. This is like basic science.
No, I know it's obvious they're hiding some, but Grant, before I get to you, I just want to ask Michael to comment. Unless you had something about that, you want a quick comment, because I want to ask Michael about this stay. I mean, if this has been going on since Wilhelm Reich and before, how do you feel about where we are in the progress and the future of this, interaction with the government?
Well, I think there's been a little progress. Like when my book Project Mindshift came out 25 years ago, the hypothesis was that the government knew a lot of things, and I asked the question, was there a program to gradually release? Was it an unofficial program? And so with Ralph Blumenthal's and his colleagues' article in 2017, they admitted that, they've known all along, right? So in the 50s, when Reich was doing his work and the government was observing it, in the trial record, I noticed something I hadn't noticed in years of reading it, that he said the government not only witnessed his experiments, but they replicated some of them. So this was, almost 70 years ago. So I think there's some progress. I agree, I think I agree with Grant and that nothing's really going to happen in the governmental level. And my feelings, am not that interested in the government. You meet people, like I met a navigator of a B-52 bombers, and he said, there we were flying 24/7, ready to take out a Rusky city, armed to the teeth with nukes, and we saw UFOs all the time. And another young guy in the intelligence field told me that he read my book and he thought all of the stuff was BS, but he was only in the intelligence community 3 weeks when he had a firsthand encounter with the phenomenon. And he said, I can't tell you what it was because by the details of it, it would be obvious it was me. And I'm under these very strict security things. My feeling has always been that if we could get to study the mass-free energy that Reich was describing that fills the universe, we could actually make more progress toward an understanding of this enigma. And, when Edgar Mitchell spoke at one of our conferences up in Rangeley, Maine, he went up to the Reich Museum, and I'd interviewed Edgar, and he said, oh, yes, I know about Wilhelm Reich. He has a powerful model, but we have the quantum wave function, and we have this, that, and the other thing. But when he saw what Reich was doing, he said, I had no idea this is what he was doing. And he talked about the role of Reich was getting coherence out of the energy field of the planet. And that accounted for the effects he was achieving. And the same with Dr. Rudy Schild, the Harvard astrophysicist we work with. He saw the Reich's basic fundamental experiment that demonstrates this energy is a real physical energy. It's not electromagnetic in nature. And Rudy has recently written that Reich's energy work unifies the quantum theory of matter with the quantum theory of consciousness. And that in this energy work that Reich was talking about and describing scientifically, Rudy says Reich was the first scientist to demonstrate through scientific experiment the spinning wave or helical nature of the movement of the primordial energy of the universe. And Edgar said he saw the primordial units of energy in space with the naked eye when he was traveling back and forth to the moon. So I feel that the more we would understand this energy, the more we would understand many of the observations people are making and have been making for decades, about this phenomenon.
Wow. Thank you for that piece. That's an interesting new piece, huh, Grant? What you had?
Well, a comment about that. Yeah, this idea of what the government has. I mean, I've quoted for many years Wilbert Smith, who ran the Canadian government UFO program, November of 1950, talked to U.S. officials and said he was told flying saucers exist. It's the most highly classified subject in the United States, and mental phenomena may be involved. The Americans aren't doing very well. So they've known basically from the word go. His son confirmed to me that his father told him on his deathbed that he'd seen the bodies. He's been shown the craft and stuff like that. So they have all this kind of stuff. And I guess it would be the idea that we are the ones we've been waiting for, that we're pushing it down the road, and the military is doing whatever they're doing, trying to get all the data together and collect money or whatever they're doing. And but I think we're making some progress in terms of understanding. I had two quick questions for Caroline that I wanted to ask, because I'm doing a lot of research on orbs lately, and I want to get your opinion on what you got for orbs and what the scientists said about them. And the other question I had for you is, you described everything that you guys were doing there. You had this, you had this. My question is always a $64,000 question. Why did the UFO in the Nimitz encounter drop from 80,000 feet down to sea level in 7/8 of a second? So what was the UFOs doing? Are they showing off? Are they displaying to you? Are they going for beer, or like, what do you think? What do you think they're actually doing?
Yeah, so now I can talk about this in this group, because I think that piece has to do with consciousness.
Yeah.
I couldn't talk about it with the scientists, like I said, because they were so hardcore. Like you couldn't mention the C word, like, oh, consciousness, forget it. Nuts and bolts, that's all we're looking at, So because I don't believe that's true. I think there's the consciousness component, and I've had my whole life, experience with that. So I was doing my work myself, in my hotel room. I'd be like, okay, I'd be like focusing and summoning and intending and communicating, because that's what I do. And those who don't want to hear it, it's their issue. Anyway, so I knew that the first sighting was going to be July 14th. That's why I scheduled the production, which, by the way, was very extensive and expensive, which I took on by myself. And so the more we got closer and closer, I was like, oh my God, we had like major, like 3 production crews, all this equipment, all these people, and no one's ever done anything like this before. Like, what am I doing? So, in 5 days, like, what if nothing happens? It was all like, thousands and thousands of dollars, like down the drain. So then I'd be like, as we got closer, I started talking to them. I was like, show me something, like one really, really, really amazing thing, and I'll be happy, And so I felt July 14th. So I scheduled the production July 12th to the 16th. And sure enough, the first 2 days were like a wash. It was like, oh my God, the power would go up, the software wouldn't work. It was a disaster. I was like, in production, every hour is like thousands of dollars. But anyway, so my point being, July 14th was the first sighting we recorded. I was like, yes. But that one it wasn't an orb. I don't think it's the same type of orb that you're talking about. It was a round physical object. I think the orb you're talking about are a little bit more translucent, right? So it was one of those things. It was hovering there forever and ever. And so we captured it from different angles. And so that was great. And then I said, okay, that was awesome, but I need more. Like, people are like talking about things falling down in the water and doing all this crazy stuff. Please, we have to make a point of what this phenomenon is. And I feel, to be honest, I don't think I'm the only one, but I probably, through the production, I kind of asked for it to be visual. I feel it has to do with that. And they demonstrated how this was possible. And like I said, we captured it through the infrared, through the FLIR cameras, not to the naked eye, which was very interesting. And so that's why, and people, by the way, can analyze the heck out of the footage because it's raw footage. We didn't manipulate it. We didn't do, the only thing we did was zoom in, which we would say zoom times 10 or whatever, or 30 or whatever, but that's not manipulating the image. And so, and also when we talk to scientists, we give them the raw files so people can study the whole thing and they will see that these were actual objects falling down. If you go frame by frame, you literally see them hitting the water, like hit the water and like illuminate, like make a splash. That's not a camera glitch. I've never heard of a camera glitch that has a, physical effect. And actually, if you look carefully, there's a couple of times where it goes up, out from the water. Try that. Look, slow down the movie and you'll see. So I think that we really had again, in 5 days, it's mind-boggling that we would have this different types of things show up. The cold, the objects that would show up out of nowhere that would register cold, like -71, I can't remember. How can an object appear out of nowhere, rotate, have an actual shape? You could see that, it's so clear, and then disappear, and it's registering cold. How can you be in the sky and not, So just stuff like that. So that's, I think it had a lot to do with consciousness and my, I think, collaboration. That's why, if you saw my last movie, Superhuman, everything we did was live on camera. For all we know, it's not going to work, or you have to do it over and over and over. So that's why I feel like, again, I think consciousness is at the base of all of our understanding and the answer to all of our paranormal questions, So that's that. And for the orbs, we did not specifically see the orbs that you're mentioning. We may have seen them in the files, like other times that we weren't, that aren't in the movie, but we didn't really focus on those.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Caroline. If you want to talk to someone who talks to UFOs every night, Melinda
Thank you.
You know what I'm talking about, right, Melinda?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. You know, thank you, Alan, for the shameless plug. I appreciate it.
No, it's not a plug because it's just so exciting. If anyone's
yeah.
watching who really wants to see stuff in the sky, go out with Melinda in Sedona with
That's
the
right.
night vision goggles,
Thank
and
you.
you'll
Yes.
see not satellite. So, Melinda, you want to talk about that?
Well, and I talk in the beginning all about satellites and planes, so we know when we're seeing those. Yes, do we see those things? Absolutely. But then we see things that are clearly none of the above. But in response, two things I want to say in response to what you're saying there, Caroline, is yeah, first off, on our tour, we often get a sense that something is coming. I often say, hey, I'm getting a psychic hit, like you were saying, Caroline, you know, and I'll say, hey, you know, and it's always sometimes right away, sometimes 10 or 15 minutes out, we have often something, you know, significant happen if I'm picking up on that. And I don't claim to call them in or anything. It's Sedona, Helen, as you know, they're just always here. We just look up. But the reason I'm bringing that up is to say, yeah, you know, it is well understood that there's this consciousness interaction, as Grant was saying. He's, you know, written this book about flying the ships with consciousness. And yeah, so on often my clients, you know, I'll tell them, direct your consciousness, direct your thought. We use lasers for pointing stuff out, and I'll say, direct it with the laser beam, you know, and ask it. And now we're asking them to flash back at us, and we do get objects doing that. Well, wait a second, we're talking something that's many tens of thousands of feet, you know, above us. For the most part. Occasionally we get low structure craft right over us, sure, but the majority of it is extremely high, much higher up than most planes, and yet we're able to direct that consciousness and ask it to flash back at us. And so, wait, are they able to hear us? You know, well, on some level, yes. You know, yeah, exactly. They're hearing us in consciousness. But as we're saying all this, I keep thinking back to the working group and those original notes in the original meeting in '85 amongst the advanced theoretical physics working group.
What was the working group, Melinda? Can you just explain it?
Well, it was a group of high-level aerospace and engineering individuals, government insiders, guys in high-tech positions, running high-tech positions for major aerospace and engineering firms at the time. And, you know, Jacques Vallée wrote about it initially as the Invisible College, you know, and then it eventually came together in this meeting in '85 under Colonel John Alexander and called the Advanced Theoretical Physics Working Group. And then over time, now, of course, this is just a quick, so everybody kind of understands the significance here. The Advanced Theoretical Physics Working Group became known as the Aviary, very famous in ufology lore. And that was researchers Bill Moore and Jamie Chandray, who were having involvement with these guys, said, so we can talk about them and we can email them about them. You know, no one else will know who we're talking about. And so they started to call them all bird names, and as a group called them the Aviary. And I don't know that the group ever referred to themselves in that way, other than maybe in jest, you know, but Moore and Chandray were the ones who gave them those names so they could talk about. And then, so working group was Aviary. And then it became, once they were getting funding from Robert Bigelow, it became kind of loosely known as the Bigelow Group until it formed a more formal organization again called NIDS, National Institute of Discovery Science. National Institute of Discovery Science morphed into, and there was overlap. I can show projects going on under both names at the same time, morphed into BASS, Bigelow Aerospace Advanced Science Studies. And BASS begat, when it got Pentagon funding, so it existed as BAS, and the only reason there was a change in name again is because the Pentagon said, okay, we're giving you funding, so it's our group now, and called it OSAP, Advanced Weapons Systems Applications Program. And then after OSAP, of course, that begat ATIP, which was under OSAP. We know that now from the book Skinwalker's the Pentagon. And so then it became ATIP, and then ATIP, when that got disclosed in 2019, front page New York Times, etc. We all know the history of that. And then that begat To the Stars Academy, and takes us to the present day, which still exists. Don't anyone think it's gone away. They're just doing media things because they're trying to make good on, according to Jim Samivan's own words to me, they're trying to make good on their investments. So, so there we are today. So we had then, and then of course, Lou Elizondo with ATIP and Chris Mellon on the board for To the Stars, and Gary Nolan and such kind of left To the Stars to branch out and do what we're doing now, which is they're meeting with congressmen and senators and the drafting of the Gillibrand Amendment. So that takes us back to that, and the National Defense Authorization Act. Now, I think so the reason I brought all that up, though, was going back to that group. Their original meeting in '85 ties in to this consciousness part, because there were two things they were predominantly interested in that meeting. I mean, throughout the meeting, you look at all the notes, right? And Grant could probably comment on this with Oak's notes. There were two things that they were significantly interested in. One was the technology, given their positions and their backgrounds, that made perfect sense. They wanted to know all about the technology, the propulsion, the anti-gravity, all that. The other was the consciousness part, the psi component. And they wanted to make contact using psi. Because
Really?
these were also the guys in the, because these were the same guys in the remote viewing program. So they were like, okay, how can we manipulate that and use it to make contact? And so the other part was the psi, the consciousness part, was their whole reason for existence. And you guys, always has been. So it's still a big part now. Now, does the government, the structured government, or those involved in the quote, cover up or policy of non-disclosure, do they know that? Heck yeah. Have they known it all along? Heck yeah. You can go back. That's one thing that these notes show is that these guys were talking about this back then. They all went, a friend of Grant and I, Nicole Sackage, a lot of people in the community know, incredible young researcher. She's gone out to now say, after that, and after that original meeting, where did all these guys go into their technologies and those companies, and how then did they take all the information from those meetings and take it and use it? And you guys, they all branched into also doing consciousness stuff. And so this became a part of what these technical companies were doing. And so she's kind of taken that aspect and gone further with it. My hat's off to her, and it'll be interesting to see what she finds. But I just wanted to say, it all comes back. Yes, it's all part of the consciousness. Absolutely.
That's what we're all getting at. But I also want, you mentioned Gary Nolan, and Ozzy, do you want to talk about your work with Gary Nolan and talk about can you mention the orb that you working with?
Yeah, okay. Well, I work with a group called the Orb Research Bureau. Basically, we are doing a lot of very interesting things. We have an app that's going to be getting upgraded soon. And we are working with Professor Nolan, and we will be having more to say about this in the summer.
But you have an orb.
What is it gonna do? What is the app gonna do?
Well, it's an AI assisted app. It's going to help us to determine what is a UFO, what is a mundane thing, things like that. Amongst other stuff, we're going to be we're doing some interesting stuff with that.
But don't you have it? Don't you have an orb in, or isn't there one around?
There's analysis that is being done. Yes.
But there's one in their possession. It's an actual orb.
Yes.
Can I ask, is that the Bates ball?
No, it isn't.
What do you mean a physical orb?
Like just
orb.
We call them spheres.
Oh, wait, Melinda.
What does it mean? What does it mean they have a physical sphere in their possession?
It's exactly that. There's a ball.
Yeah, this is what I want to jump in on this exact discussion. You guys, orbs has become, well, unfortunately, and
It's
don't
all over
anybody
the place.
bucket this. Yeah, exactly, Carolyn. It's become such a catch-all term to mean many
Yeah,
things.
that's
There are
exactly why
sightings that are objects way up in the sky
Right.
that are too far away to see the structure of them. You're not seeing hard edge, structure. You're seeing something reflecting probably sunlight over the horizon, even though it's nighttime, or if you're seeing it during the day, it's definitely reflecting light. So you can see something that is lit up, but you're not seeing the structure of it. That is still a structured object reflecting light. We see this every night in the 10s, 20s, 30s, 40s on my tour. Okay, now that's the same reason you see satellites, is they're reflecting sunlight. Okay, so but then you can get a consciousness or spirit energy emanating light. That is the orbs, I think, Grant, that you've written more about,
Right.
and what is traditionally seen. Exactly. So I think it's really, I think it's, when you use the term orb, you have to start clarifying, because it's so misunderstood. There's a spiritual thing that's orbs, and a consciousness thing, and then there's physical craft that are maybe too far away or too small to see the structure of it.
And
I
that's
think
what I was asking
clarifying.
about. Which one
Yeah.
is it that you're talking about? Because you
That's
said in
why-
their possession.
That's why I make the difference between an orb and a sphere, because orbs are loaded. And like
Well,
everybody
sphere
has, like,
tends to mean something round and ball shaped. When these may be too far
material.
away to know the shape, you're
I'm
just
not
seeing
talking about-
something
I'm talking-
reflecting light
I'm not-
or
yeah, I'm not-
emanating a
I'm not
plasma
talking-
field.
I'm not talking about some type of like ball of plasma. I'm talking about a physical metal
Physical
sphere.
orb. Yeah.
Which
Yeah,
is
like-
what? Which is what?
Okay,
why
let me
is it-
explain a little bit what
Why
I know
is
about
it
it.
so?
Let Grant explain.
Let me explain a little bit what they've got. What happened in the 1970s is the National Enquirer put up $1 million reward for proof of an extraterrestrial ET. So they found this ball in Florida. It's a seamless ball. There's no seams in it. And they would put it on top of the TV, and the thing would roll around on the TV, and it would go on the floor, and it just it would do stuff on its own. And so they brought it into the National Enquirer, and apparently it's still there. They analyzed it, and they knew something was inside it, but it's completely seamless. And I think that's what they have as well. They have one of these. It's a steel ball, bigger than the big bowling ball. But
Can
this
you
thing
show
will
the
actually
video?
move around on its own.
Ozzy, can you show the video? Do you have the video of that? You can show? Okay, never mind.
Yeah. So it's more a sphere than an orb. It's like a sphere. It's like a small seamless ball, but it's maybe this big. It's pretty big.
So they have a lot more than that in their possession, the government, but that's one thing that's Gary Nolan is
Well,
actually.
the National Enquirer has the one in possession. You guys have one in your possession. And there may be more of these. And that's the question. Did they drop one of these things for us to pick up and try to figure? That's what I say about the metals. I say there's no way that a UFO comes across the galaxy, avoiding black holes and stars and planets and stuff, and it gets here and pieces start falling off it. They're dropping these things on purpose. And this sphere may be the same thing. It's one of these things that we've been gifted. In fact, they refer to it, like Tim Taylor calls it the gifting field. And all these people, and Jacques Vallée said he sort of came up with the idea that they're gifting this stuff, that these crashes and stuff, this is not happening accidental. This is actually happening on purpose.
Yeah.
Hey,
No,
Michael, what do you
agree.
think of this, advanced technology? What, because I think if Reich was allowed to do his experiments, we'd be much further along.
Well, we would definitely be much further along. And, but there's so many levels of why he wasn't allowed to do it. And it's not just, there's the whole characterological level of it. And do you guys remember the book, Charles Berlitz, the Roswell, I can't remember, the Roswell
Incident. Roswell incident. Yeah.
In there, there's a story where a friend of Eisenhower goes to, I think, Muroc Air Force Base.
Yeah.
And the people there, they have a crash disk, and it's in a hangar, and they're studying it. And this emissary from Eisenhower goes in, and it's complete chaos and pandemonium. And he writes back to the president, the people who went into that area, their world ended with a suddenness and finality that they just could not handle emotionally. And these were the people who were prepared. These were the engineers and scientists and philosophers and thinkers who wanted to be the people who would have a direct encounter with the phenomenon. And I think most of humanity, 98% of humanity, would still have that reaction today. I think, there's been some progress made, but when I did my book, I interviewed a man named Michael Lindemann,
Oh, yeah.
and he said about himself, he said, I think I want to meet a being. I would love it to meet a being, but if one of them appeared in front of me right now, I'd probably pee in my pants, And so it's a serious thing. It isn't just fear. It's that we all have a worldview, and our worldview gives us equilibrium and stability and helps us make sense in the chaos of the world. And if it ends or is disrupted too deeply, too suddenly, it's, we fall apart. And then some people react to falling apart with violence. And so I think there's a good reason why human beings are learning slowly about this phenomenon over generations, and we can't assume we're kind of a self-selected group, but I mention it to people forgetting that, and it scares them, like to invite them to come to our conference, and it's frightening to them. And it's scary. One time you were talking about, it was years ago, and I was in my apartment uptown, and I saw 2 lights in the sky out the window. I thought it was like Venus and something. About 40 minutes later, they were still there. So I realized they weren't planets. So in my own little sense of humor, I went to the window and said, if there's any intelligent beings in those lights, would you answer this question? Is this an experiment? And the answer instantaneously came back, yes, but not in the way you think it is. And I thought, I think it's an experiment? That's what I think? I think it's an experiment. But other people could have an experience like that, and it would frighten them. And it would lead to some pretty negative kind of reactions socially.
That's why we're having.
I think though,
we can't live for our
The
lives.
more, one second, Melinda. The more this is talked about, the more the government says, well, yeah, maybe there is something. The less frightening, the less surprised, the more we're prepared for the truth, which is that we're part of a bigger reality. That's my feeling. So we have to push the government, we have to push each other to come out, make films like Carolyn, and go out and seize ships with Melinda. So yeah, Melinda, what were you saying?
well, I was just gonna say, I think that's, everyone in the field gets frustrated at not being disclosure, going slowly, and now these amendments passing and everything. From what I'm hearing, it sounds like at least senators and House representatives, congressmen, are trying to ease us into this in a certain way. Now, you could argue, oh, that's good or that's bad or whatever, but I think part of, Michael, because I think in general, you're right. Now, I can also say this from so many people I take out of my tours every night. I mean, you guys, I've had easily 30 or 40,000 people in the 12 years I've been doing it, probably over 40, easily. And I can say that if that's a sampling of the public wants to know and is ready. And now, granted, you're getting a sampling of the public that are coming to Sedona. Alan, as you well know, we're, and Carolyn and stuff, we're known for spirituality and metaphysics and whatnot. So people coming here tend, not everyone, but a high percentage, and probably 80% of the people tend to be very open to New Age thought, to consciousness studies and whatnot. So, but that crowd, I can say, is definitely ready. They want to know, they're open to it. Now, it could be the reason we're getting this so slowly is the government's not responding, obviously, to ufology or even to the New Age consciousness community. The government is responding to the rest of the US, and a little bit responsible towards the world's reaction towards this is my guess. And so we're getting this very slow, deliberate kind of disclosure. And it's frustrating because we all want it to speed up, but I think it's happening for the reasons you just said. Now,
can I just interrupt 1 second and say the beings also play a role in the pace.
Well, they're,
of-
I can tell you from
of
my
awareness.
tours though, they're showing up all the time. You know, I
I
mean,
know, but the pace of it, I did a talk where I looked at the last 70 years, decade by decade, and what was learned and what we saw and how we progressed and so forth. And it's like a school. It's like a class. It's like a course, and you get a little bit, and then you're allowed to integrate it. And then after you integrate it, you can move on to the next step. So I think it's not just the humans. I think it's also the intelligences themselves.
Yeah, that's
well,
what
and maybe there's something to be said for that, because they're showing up, but they're not landing everywhere.
there
They're
has
not
to be-
getting out and interacting with everyone. And,
Yeah, there-
my clients always say that, why aren't they landing? Why aren't they getting out? And I think you just made the case for that. It's
Well, I think
that
Grant-
they're approaching us in a slow way where they're making it something we can adjust to. I think you're right.
No, there has to be some type of duality with that, like some type of, they're involved in some type of decision making with that, because there's some people that are really into this stuff, love it, and don't really have much going on. There's other people that really want nothing to do with it and have this stuff falling on them like constantly.
Well,
Like
I think Grant has been looking at that particular aspect of the phenomenon. Go ahead, Grant.
We talked about this yesterday, and I say this thing with what Michael brought up, that we think we're ready, but I know I had the one experience in 1976 where we were chasing this thing around. It would go so slow, you could actually chase with a car. And then suddenly it turned around and came and it's right on top of the car. I was never so scared in my life. It was like unbelievable. I couldn't believe how scared I was. But the point I was making to you yesterday, Alan, is I say, we are in a mentality. I say, can you actually tell me for sure that you believe that reptilians, grays, and mantids could walk down the street of America? Would they be allowed to emigrate into the United States and build businesses where they're going to build cars and they're going to build a factory, and they're going to have free energy, and they don't pay their workers, they don't get paid, and they have a technology that's 1,000 years advanced that can build a car for $100 and it's super advanced? Are we going to allow this? And that's where I say what the fear that I see going on in this thing with Congress is that it's the guys, the military industrial complex, who are, we want this stuff all gathered, but we're going to collect it and it's all going to be classified. And it was the threat scenario. And I can tell you, I was in the negotiations between the Canadians and the Americans, and Lou Elizondo was there and Chris Mellon was there. And we were at the Canadian side, the government people were trying to explain to them. We had 10 MPs ready to come forward, and we were going to have a panel. They said, no, we're not going to turn this into a spectacle. And we were trying to explain to them that we don't work the same as the United States. We don't have these committees that have money and they can order stuff and do whatever they want. Everything is run by the prime minister and it runs from there down, and they just couldn't get it. And at one point, the Canadians made it very clear, we are not going to do the fear thing. We are not going to do the military thing. They wanted us to get military witnesses and say, oh, it's a threat to the military. They're in our airspace and all this kind of stuff. And we say, we haven't got any of those kind of reports. We don't want to go there. We're not into that. The Canadians want to do a scientific investigation. And at that point, Chris Mellon said, that's the poison pill. I'm gone. And it was over. And that was the whole deal. And that's what I say, what you got to be afraid of is that behind the scenes, the military industrial complex is gathering all this material. They're getting everybody to report stuff to them, and they're going to spin this thing as a threat. So Eric Walker asked us the question, and he was the head president of Penn State University, 14 honorary doctorate degrees on the Defense Science Board, the chairman of the board of the Institute for Defense Analysis, a top military think tank. And he said to us at one point, he said, why should we change the rules to satisfy your curiosity? And if you figure it out, what are you going to do with it? And that's the question is, yeah, everybody wants to admit, yeah, they're here. But when it comes down to them walking around in the streets, I'll guarantee you, I had a discussion with Art Bell, and Art Bell said to me, he said, I'll shoot them as they come off the ship.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
This mentality of separation that's going on. There's no way these people could walk down the street and integrate at this point. We're way far away from that. We're into this thing about you versus me. We can't accept Mexicans or anybody that's not, looking like us. And the Grays, they would absolutely, every time they turn around, somebody try to shoot them. They were way far away from that.
Yeah, I don't think it's like the whole mass hysteria, whatever that they're feeding us. I think it's what you just said, Grant. Like that's the average typical person. An intruder shows up at your door, you shoot him. So
Right.
imagine something that looks like
Yeah.
non-human. That's the typical human reaction. I don't know what this thing is, it's going to attack me or whatever. So that's, I think, one of the reasons why they're not, kind of showing up
Well,
from their
Well,
perspective.
no, like
And-
there's issues. Like, I mean, could you imagine what like this will do to the gun control debate? How many
Yeah,
people that are
exactly.
super pro gun
Yeah.
control that will
Oh,
start
yeah.
trying to buy illegal weapons for themselves personally?
Oh, they'll go
Yeah,
nuts.
exactly.
They'll go nuts. You guys,
Melinda,
it's interesting as you guys are saying this. I, as we're having this discussion right now about the sphere stuff, I keep reflecting back to my MILABS research and the abductees who are having covert human involvement and get picked up by these covert human guys actually managing this subject on those deepest levels. Those guys want to know from the experiencers, from the abductees to clarify, they want to know, like, how are you able to interact with the ETs? What is it about you? How have you adapted to it? How do you communicate with them? Has it enhanced your psi abilities? But it gets down to, they're trying to learn how to interact with these beings, Grant, because of what you just said, to say, how have we adapted? How are we interacting with them? And that's one thing that comes up in, you guys I've worked with well over 100, probably 200 MILAB cases now. And they all say that when they get the interrogation stuff and the questioning, they get asked about that. They really want to understand that and get a handle on it. Because I think you're right, Grant, that's where the rubber meets the road. That scares them. And because it is so consciousness oriented, as we were just saying, that empowerment, I think, scares them, that it requires us to act on that level, to act in that consciousness way. And so I think that's part of the difficulty here. But so they're starting with something, again, this is disclosure panel, they're starting with something very, very simple, which is sightings, because at least people can start to wrap their head around it. I get it. I think I get why they're going at it that way. It's painfully slow, but I think I understand. Again, disclosure's not for us, it's for everybody else.
That was what Bud Hopkins said in a conversation I had. We have to start with establishing something's there. We have to say, oh yeah, it's out there. But on the other end of it, I think I can safely say, perhaps all of us on this panel are experiencers, and we are so excited about the fact that this is real. We know it, we've seen it, and why it's like we're the crazy people. Why isn't everyone excited like this? But there's like, it's like the Catholic Church putting Galileo in jail because he said, there's rings around Saturn or something. We're being denied a very essential truth of our own experience. And I think that's why we're so passionate. I know Ozzy's a lifelong experiencer. I'm sure everyone else, we've all had. And even me, what Michael said about that story, I was out there with a group of people in the mountains of Berkshire Mountains, and we're calling in a craft. And then something showed up, flying low, is very silent. It was big. It wasn't an airplane. It wasn't flashing. And I said, is that really? I couldn't believe it was there. I mean, it's like, there it was. And I said, wow, is that really what I think it is? Like, there's still this old programming, not a fear, but like, really? Are these things real? And this is the science fiction conditioning. It's like the world is not science fiction. It's a reality. And we have to just move away from the programming of fear and conditioning. Because still, when we talk about this to other people saying, oh yeah, you're making up a story. It must be science fiction. You've seen too many movies. Grant, were you going to say something about that?
Yeah, well, just the point that the other thing I think that's a problem is the consciousness that when you look at the thing with where I do the UFO sky pilots, when the people start talking about using the craft where they can go 70,000 miles, light years in 1 second, and they tell you it's within yourself, it's the whole thing. You think yourself as a puny form within you, the entire use is enfolded, or Jim Semivan saying, there does not appear to be any there. And here's a guy who had the actual encounter with the beings in his room. And it's this whole idea of, is this a simulated universe? Is this a video game? Are they telling us, explaining to us slowly that this is all within us, that there is no time and space. And it's all these kind of things that are just so far beyond anybody's belief system that they're just not going to accept it. Like the idea that with the people describe inside the ship, when they go inside the ship and it's the size of a football stadium inside the ship, and they look outside and it's a little tiny craft, they look inside, it's this huge thing. And then you get that kind of stuff that it's so far beyond, and it's the idea that the world is not the way you think it is. That's why I say I think it's 1,000 times more complex. And it's like when Chris Bledsoe said, he talked to all these military people and Tim Taylor from NASA and all these different people coming to him, and he said, why are you coming to me? Why do you guys always come to me? And he said, well, it appears you've got some sort of contact, and we're trying to figure it out because they don't seem to want to talk to us. And so he's got this idea where he's got this contact, but they can't figure it out. They've got a craft, they can't fly it, and this idea where you can make things bigger, they can make the ship as big as they want inside, and it's just so far beyond. It's this, you got to go to this video game idea that it's the Maya. There may not be any time and space. It may all be here inside of us, and it's way more complex than we think. Almost Jim Semivan summed it up. There does not appear to be any there. This seems to be something on the level of consciousness or multi-dimensions. And there's a guy who got the briefing, he got the UFO briefing. He seems to know, he's one of the inside guys. And that's where I think it's going. It's just so far beyond what anybody can ever imagine what's actually going on. It's really not nuts and bolts. It may not even be aliens. It may be, some sort of thing. And it's this huge video
but I
game.
think it's not an either or. It's not either nuts or bolts or there's some we're not understanding about consciousness because
Alan, I'd like to just jump in with this and say, because our worldview is really a mechanistic, metaphysical way of approaching the world, and it's inadequate. This phenomenon can't be understood, I feel, through the tools of mechanistic science, but it can't be understood either through the purely subjective metaphysical approaches that we've developed over thousands of years. And that's why it's remained an enigma. And one of the things that attracted me so much when I was young to Wilhelm Reich's work, and then when I saw that he was involved in studying the UFO phenomenon, was that he left the metaphysical mechanistic worldview and he came to what he called energetic functionalism as a way of approaching this. And he was able to escape that dichotomy of it looks physical, but it looks spiritual, it looks objective, but it looks subjective. And that if you get into this way of observing things, you see the same thing, but you don't interpret it in the false way. It's like 400 years ago when people believed that the planets moved in perfect circles. Their observations of the movement in the sky were correct, but their interpretation was wrong because they believed it was a perfect circle. So when Kepler came to understand that the planets moved in an ellipse, then the planets' movements became understandable. The observations were always correct. It was the interpretation of the facts through the worldview that caused people trouble. And we're in this mechanistic, metaphysical worldview, but this is not a metaphysical, mechanistic phenomenon. And so it has remained an enigma. But you can't just jump into this other worldview because it involves your whole character structure. It's not an intellectual construct. And so it takes time to emotionally change and to feel the energy moving in your body and then feel that energetic resonance with the phenomenon. And Edgar and Mitchell and Rudy and I and Trish, we would have these conversations of how maybe the quantum hologram, which is not a hologram like a computer simulation kind of thing. It's the energy that we're emitting and the energy that we're absorbing and the physical energetic connection with the phenomenon and the information that is contained in the energy we give out and the information that's contained in the energy that we perceive. But it's not, we use the word psychic because we don't have enough knowledge about this new way that Rudy and Edgar were describing the quantum hologram. But I'm sure everyone here, you're walking along and you realize, oh my God, and you look up and there's a craft because you're in an energetic resonance with it and you're getting information and you're giving information, but it takes time to overcome the harm that's done to us in our child rearing and our growing up in this culture, and particularly the Western culture, to be able to, reach that state and be open to it.
Thank you, Michael. That was really great. I also have to say, John Mack had anticipated this when he said we need another way of knowing.
Right.
That's objective. And I want to just go to Ozzy for a second, after Ozzy, Melinda, because he's had a lifetime of experiences and you are now passionate about disclosure. Can you talk about your process a little bit?
Gosh, many long stories. I got into this very early. I was a part of the Hudson Valley sightings as a boy with my mom. And
Very cool.
yeah, we had a CE3 basically on the roof of our building. Yeah, and this, at that time, I didn't know that my mother and my grandmother were a part of a satellite group that was attached to Sixto Paz's organization.
Oh,
as
Sixto
well.
Paz.
Yeah, and my mother was always involved in theosophy. She used to work with a guy named Benjamin Cream, who some of you may have heard of before. I lived my entire life 3 blocks from the Nicholas Roerich Center. Like I've always had a lot of weird things. Like I had, well, my mother and I had the sighting on the roof, and I was always a space-minded kid and a technology-minded kid. I loved space, loved aliens, but I wasn't into science fiction. I was into like hard science and things like that. And I had this experience, and my mother had tons of UFO books hidden in a closet, and they were never around when I was growing. Like, I was still very young, 7, and basically my mother gave me access to those books because I was just like I had to know more about this. And from there, like it's been a bunch of, I've had a lot of experiences. I've had perhaps more than.
Why are you pushing for this? Why is disclosure so important to you? Because it's important to me because it validates my experience, but why is it important to you?
This is the most important thing that's ever going to happen on so many levels. I've known that since I was a boy. Like that was just from that day, it was plain to me as a child. And I've always carried that with me, even like while trying to run screaming from this subject, which Grant is correct. There's none of that. There's no leaving this. I accept, and I am grateful that I get to be a part of this at whatever level I can be in. This is super important, and honestly, it's we all do things with our lives. This is a great thing to do, to try to help this effort. I see a lot of important things getting done that aren't being done because once we get this done, happening for us, I think that I mean, there's all these reasons. You all, like, you are the same type of people, you, like, if you're here, you understand that, that at least that much,
That's
and
what I feel about the experiences pushing the movement. When Caroline, I did the interview with her from my book, she talked about her 5 years old and these beings appeared. And
oh no, like I can honestly tell you that, like, I've had been going through a lot of reflection lately, and like I said, I've been in UFOs forever. I was the youngest member of Space support program for abductee contactee encounters, Harold England's group back in the 90s, back when I was 13. In fact, I met Grant at a Virginia Beach MUFON thing, like way back deep in the 90s, like epic, like long time ago. And and basically I was I was the subject of an MTV special. I think it's still the only UFO special that MTV ever did, back when I was 19. And basically I can say this though, that there are experiences that I've had years ago, particularly like a bunch that happened in 2007, which have directly impacted my life in the last year, and has led me to all sorts of things that I am currently involved in. quite by accident.
Well, that's why I think it's a passion for us because we know it's real. And maybe that's why Kristian Gillibrand, she might be an experiencer. And that, well, Carolyn, talk about your passion for this subject, because like you have really put a lot of time, money, and great creative projects into showing people this is a reality.
Yeah, I mean, I've had experiences since I was 5. I told the story several times, but just in brief, at 5 years old, I could see those beings appear to me, and I realized that I could see them, hear them, understand them. I could see also the subtle energy, basically the space between me and them, like the fabric of space itself. I could like see everything, and I saw how telepathy worked. So at a very young age, this experience stayed with me. And I also saw that I was like in physical form here, but I continued, like my lineage continued through these beings. So it was very profound experience. Of course, I'm 5 years old. I didn't have all the explanation at the time, but what that did was kind of stayed in my consciousness and got me to ask the question, how does it all work? Like, how did this happen? Like, this is the physical world, but then there's this other part, where you see beings, you hear things, and so on and so forth. So I got into the field of consciousness for a very long time, but I kept having all sorts of experiences. The first thing I did was create methodologies to make sure that I was discerning correctly the truth, that it wasn't me. I wasn't projecting something. I wasn't inventing something. I wasn't hoping for something. And so, but then I would see beings that I had no reference, like a point of reference for. And then those types of things kind of continued to prove to me that I was interacting with another world. So for me, having those experiences my whole life and having validation after validation after validation, when you have a craft, and then you say, this is pretty recent actually, and then you communicate with them and you say, well, if you are what I think you are, then show me something. Then they start to split from 4, lights to 6, then to 8. Okay, well, if you can hear me, then show me something else. I start walking, 1 mile, half a mile in one direction, and these things are like following me. I mean, this cause and effect thing happening in real time over and over, that sort of stuff. It's like, enough, I know this is real. So this is my personal truth, and for so many people working with hundreds of people doing regression, struggling with the fact that they know it's true, but the outside world is telling them it's not real, blah, blah, blah. So that's the first point. The second thing that's really important to me is bringing the truth in general, no matter what the subject is, because that's what's going to free humanity from the bondage, being slaves to somebody else's belief system, so that's another very important thing for me, the freedom to have the direct connection, communication with the universe, with source, with this other world, because that's what I had. And I feel every human being has the birthright to have this direct interaction and live at that level of freedom. So that's the second point. And the third point, so I feel like the truth has to come out. And the third point is, I feel the key, the extraterrestrial, that whole world of UFOs, technology, fabric of space-time, are we talking about quantum mechanics or wormholes or whatever? I feel that this is also, in a more practical ways, guiding and leading us to the technology of free energy and communication, and that's why it's being kept a secret, because the minute you give free energy to humanity, that's another form of freedom. We don't need big pharma. We don't need the oil company. We don't need anybody. You see, you bring that energy directly from the cosmos. You convert it into energy to fuel this and that. I know this technology exists. I know how it works in other worlds. And so that's another reason why I feel it's so important. I'm going to do anything I can. I'm going to keep talking about it no matter what anybody says. I'm going to keep sharing. I'm going to spend all my money, go and get data. I mean, that's what I'm doing. That's what I'm doing. I'm putting my own savings, my own time, my own life out there, getting real data, real footage, so stop the BS. Don't tell me the data's not there. Boom, here it is. So that's what I'm saying. So I'm trying to take charge and do everything I can personally to bring that truth. So I think you feel a little bit of the passion, don't you?
Beautiful, and thank you. Obviously, whatever's there is not filling up their gas tank to get here, so there is free energy.
Of
But
course.
one
It's
question-
ridiculous. Like you really think that, they have a propulsion system like, oh, let's make the engine stronger and stronger. First, we'll get to the moon, then we'll get to Mars. Then after like hundreds and hundreds of years, maybe we'll get, it's ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense. Like, we will never get to any other planet, like ever. Like, it's just so retarded. Sorry.
I agree. But thank you, because Newtonian physics is 400 years old. We need a new propulsion or whatever. But the question I just want to ask, and you could jump in first, is are we, our passion, because all of us have it, we've been doing it for years, are we an extension of the phenomena? Are we the foot soldiers of the phenomena? It's like, are we?
Yeah.
Yes. Hello.
Yeah,
Anything you can think of. Each one of us has their own angle of the truth. That's what I'm saying. We all have to be out there.
Yeah, no, until about a year ago, I would have been like, kind of like, yeah, these things happen. I try to do what I can. There's not much I can do about it. Now it's like, yeah, no, this has all happened. And for some reason, I'm doing what I'm doing.
For some reason, because you're an exception.
We are the disclosure. We are the disclosure. There's no other hope. I mean, honestly.
Yeah, Grant, yes, jump in.
Yeah. Well, I'm a big Michael Newton, so I always see things in terms of Michael Newton's 7,000 regressions of life between life, where we all choose. And that was the whole thing I asked about, the whole thing about soul contract and the connection between the beings. Are we part of this whole phenomena? And I asked Mary Rodwell, if you regress everybody back to birth, how many will say this, they agreed to be an abductee? And she said 100%. And then I asked Kathy Martin, and Kathy Martin said, I was wondering about that. So I had myself regressed, and I heard the words come out of my mouth. I agreed to this. So I see it that way, that it really doesn't matter what anybody else is doing. It's if you accept the fact that we have multiple lives, when we leave this life, it's going to become a dream. And in the life after that, it's going to become a forgotten dream. And all we are is we are learning. So we are coming in here, and we have agreed to come in at this time, this place. I believe this whole thing about the 3 waves, that we're coming in, we've got a purpose to do. And that's why we get so excited when it happens, because it's almost like we see, oh yeah, I remember now, and you get a spark by it. And it's like Bashar says, you live to your highest excitement, and you'll always make the right decision, just what excites you. And we go through it, and in the end, they're going to ask us how to work out, because I believe we all came in to do something in this field, to move this ball down the field. And it really doesn't matter what anybody else is doing or what they're not doing. They're only going to ask us one question, is how did it work out? Because we planned the whole thing. We planned who we're going to meet up with, what we're going to do. And as Newton said, all 7,000 people said the same thing. Oh, I could have done better. I forgot this. I was going to do that, but I got scared. And so it's up to us to do what we're doing. And and Alan knows, I always go to this. We are in the Super Bowl of all stories. It's the biggest story of all time. And we got lucky enough to play in the game. Most people don't even know there's a game. They're outside the stadium. They don't even know we're in the Super Bowl of all stories. And we should respect the fact that we got to play in this game, and that we may have some important role to do, and just figure out what excites us about this field, and just do it. And that's what we came to do. And quit worrying about, is it going to happen? When's it going to happen? Because it comes down to you and I, what we are learning from the system. Life goes on forever. It's endless. And we're just learning these lessons. It may take 10,000 years, but it comes down to what did we learn while we were in the process. It doesn't matter. It's learning while the process is going on, not the end, because that's what a Western society is. We want to see the end. We want everything. We want it now. We want it yesterday. And we have to forget about that and realize we are on a journey, and that we have something to do, and basically do it. And then just one point about the free energy, because I always bring this up, is the fact that everything is free energy. Hydro's free, nuclear is free. It's all free, but it's building the system. And that's what I say the Black Ops is trying to do, is you're going to need a system to distribute the free energy. And that's what they're trying to control. It's going to be the same thing. It's going to be like the oil companies. They own the oil companies. They own the nuclear power plants, and they're going to own the free energy equipment that will give us this free energy and charge us for it. And that's what's going on behind the scenes, that there's a lot of money in this. People may know the fact that Tim Taylor had this invention he got in the middle of the night. And according to what I heard, he sold the company that invention was part of on NASDAQ for $100 million. There's a lot of money in this. There's a lot of people in behind the scenes who are looking for patents. They're not going to put anything out when they can get a patent on this kind of stuff. And but it doesn't really matter what they're doing, whether it's right or wrong. It's always a self-reflective thing. Why did I come into the world? And what am I doing? Am I doing it? And you can feel good about the question when you get asked how did it work out, because you say, I tried my best, I did my best, and that's it. That's all you can do.
Thank you, Grant, for what you're doing. Melinda, you were also, in the beginning of the show, you brought up the Wilson document and the Osborn. Can you finish those thoughts about what's going on with that? And wait, we can't hear you, Melinda. But, and then we'll wrap up and people can kind of give a little, I can't hear you right now. Your sound, no.
You disappeared, Melinda.
We'll come back to you.
I can quickly answer one question, because I worked on these as well. The important thing.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Okay, sorry. I guess I had self-muted by cord thing, not realizing I had.
Up here. Just finish that statement about those revelations you had mentioned and all that, you know.
Me?
Yeah, you mentioned the Osborn and the
Oh, no, Wilson Davis document.
No, but there was
and
something you mentioned.
Shannon. Okay, Shannon. Okay, and Jack Haug. It's a complicated thing, so it's hard to get into in a brief way. The Wilson Davis notes get into it's a conversation between scientist Dr.
Eric Davis.
Eric Davis, thank you. Sorry, I'm just freezing up for a moment. Eric Davis and Admiral Wilson. Okay, when that happened, NIDS, National Institute of Discovery Science, had basically sent Eric, and the one making the connection to the Admiral, who knew the Admiral and said, you should talk to Eric, okay, was Oak Shannon. So I'm oversimplifying, but it's a very difficult thing to get into. But
documents, Grant, but that
okay, but okay, the significance of this document is, well, the document's really just meeting notes that Eric Davis took. But the significance is it gets into that there were crash retrievals and a reverse engineering program, and that the government physical craft in their possession. Oh, it says my internet is unstable. Can you guys hear me? Am I freezing up?
Yeah.
Okay, you can hear me?
You look pretty stable.
Okay, froze up for a minute. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Bad time for that to happen. Okay.
It's okay.
So okay, as long as you can hear me now. So the that's what the meeting was about, that the Admiral had gone looking. Long story behind that, it was a meeting with Dr. Stephen Greer and others, the late Dr. Edgar Mitchell and Will Miller and others that had this meeting with the Admiral that caused him to, and had kind of, Greer had briefed him, if you will, on what was likely going on with a reverse engineering program and that going into private hands. So at the time, Admiral Wilson was second in command of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. So it was a matter of him going, okay, what is going on here? And he had questions. So he went digging and he found some information. Now his hands were slapped and he was scared away from the program and said, look, you're going to lose a star, you're going to lose your promotion to the head of the Joint Chiefs and your promotions, etc. And so this is going to reflect badly on you. And so he left it alone. But but he had conversations with Oak Shannon about it, and eventually, and apparently years before this meeting had happened, 3 years is my understanding, is that right, Grant? That Oak Shannon had said, talk to Eric Davis. But he waited, the admiral, for whatever reason, probably till he felt safer about doing so. And but he had looked into it, and he had gone to one of the aerospace companies because he had asked people under him running the SAP, special access programs, and said, is this true? Is there this government money going to this reverse engineering, and have there been crash retrievals that have gone into private industry? And they said, ask these guys. Okay, and these guys were one of the major aerospace companies. While the Wilson Davis notes don't say who that was, everybody is fairly certain it means Lockheed. So that's kind of the general consensus. But he goes to the heads of this program, and they basically say, you don't have the authority to know. This is a corporate owned secret, and therefore you don't have this authority to know. You're not on the what's called a bigot list, the list of people, who get to know about this. And so they sent him away. He was very upset. So again,
not only upset, but he's like a big, guy in the military. And
he said, it's my position to know. This is under my authority. Yeah. And so he said, what do you mean? And so it is being upset, and is sharing that with Oak and probably with Dr. Mitchell. Long story short is NIDS then, who Oak was part of the original working group. So that's how he knew all those individuals. And Dr. Edgar Mitchell was on the Science Advisory Board, as well as others, at the time, Jacques Vallée. And I think we're going to get some of this coming out in Jacques Vallée's new book, getting into that time period. That's a whole nother story. But so meanwhile, Eric meets with the admiral. The admiral's very upset, shares all this with him. Eric, whether records it or takes notes, we think he probably recorded it because of the exactness of the notes. And there you go. That's where that stands. Now, why this matters is this was read into the congressional record in May in the public hearing by Congressman Gallagher. And now we have had Dr. Gary Nolan, who's part of the working group and is quite very good friends with Eric Davis. I witnessed that at SCU conference, that they're very close, that whole group. I already knew that, but it was very obvious there. Okay, so he goes back with that group, and Dr. Gary Nolan has said in multiple interviews now, most notably a very extensive interview that he did for Channel 7 in Australia with Ross Coulthart. So Ross Coulthart interviews him, and he says, I briefed Congressman Gallagher because my friend, Dr. Eric Davis, told me this meeting happened between him and the admiral, and that those are his notes. And so he briefed Congressman Gallagher in closed door sessions, which is why Congressman Gallagher brought it up and said to the guys heading up the UAP task force in that congressional hearing, we're going to address this again. So that's why Wilson Davis, it was already important, but it became very important because it became front and center part of the current disclosure story when that happened. Now, Grant came forward with notes from the original meeting with Oak Shannon saying, because Oak Shannon has gone public and said, everything the admiral quotes me as saying in there happened. The admiral and I had those meetings and those discussions. So then Grant has these meetings going back to the original meeting of the working group. And I have Jack Helk, who was also at that meeting. And these back up Shannon's role in helping put Eric as a member of the working group and the admiral together, and why there's that connection. So anyway, but Admiral Wilson is in play now because those notes were brought up in congressional hearing. I don't think Gallagher and Gillibrand and everyone are going to let it, die. Okay. And this is going to come up again. I think if there are hearings, and I'm hearing from Attorney Daniel Sheehan, who I'm good friends with, that there will be more hearings, at the very least closed door. And Dan Sheehan says the reason all that verbiage is in the NDAA this year, going into next year's, in other words, the one right now that has verbiage that has already passed the House and Senate. It's in the NDAA. It's just waiting to the rest of the unrelated things, amendments and legislation to be in there before it goes to Biden for signature. Now, last year, Biden signed it on December 27th, right after coming back from Christmas. But we are hearing through the grapevine that it is very likely to get signed way before then. It may get signed, according to Danny, in November, and maybe in December, we'll see. But when that is signed, that verbiage in there, I'm under the understanding it's 31 pages of verbiage, but it gets into specifically that that it's Congress and the Senate wanting to know, specific things, but it gets into them wanting to know about reverse engineering programs and crash retrievals. And this is why I'm bringing it up right now. It's not only a big part of the story, but it's the verbiage that we're calling the whistleblower verbiage or the amnesty. Those words aren't in there, but it gives a 3-year period of time for anyone involved, anyone in military and intelligence circles who are involved in the UFO subject or UFO projects or past projects or past departments and things going on, what they call legacy programs, but also even if you've had a sighting or whatever, a reverse engineering program, whatever it is, it gives you, apparently it's written in the legislation to give you the ability to come forward and talk about it without going against your NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, or without going against your security clearances.
Read the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2023 online. By the way, Grant, were you going to say something there about that? Because
just the fact that this document has been read in, she mentioned that they're going to use this as a sort of a roadmap to call witnesses, because it
That's
does
right.
open up.
That's what I was about to say. It's about calling the witnesses. Go ahead.
Yeah, and what disappoints me a little bit about it is now we've learned that Leslie Kean saw this document in 2008, and Jacques Vallée has now admitted he saw it at least 8 years before it was released. And I'm thinking, like, this is the way it goes, that the ufology game, that the UFO people have got more secrets than the government, and that if everybody would sort of come forward and release it, we'd get this thing solved. And, because I had a hard time releasing the document myself, both documents. But I mean, it's like the Bible says, what profiteth a man if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul? Like, why are we keeping this stuff secret all the time? It just annoys me.
did a great thing by releasing the Wilson Davis documents, because in the Wilson Davis documents, and we'll wrap up, you get a glimpse of the wizard behind the curtain. You get a glimpse of who's pulling the strings. And it's not Mellon, it's not the president, it's not Elizondo. There's this, whoever's giving these contracts to those defense private industries is that secret government that is in a way controlling our lives, and that's what we're pushing against.
Well, and that's what Senate and Congress is up against right now, when they start asking if, because of the passing this legislation, I am hoping that they have the fortitude when they do hearings again to ask Dr. Eric Davis and Admiral Wilson to both testify. I think if asked, whether closed or open, that those guys will then say that meeting happened, those notes are real, and then it gets thrown back to Congress to do a congressional investigation into the reverse engineering and into crash retrievals and whatnot, which is the deeper layer of the onion that, that we're eventually going to go there, and that could force their hand. And that's what I'm hoping will happen.
Making snail's progress, but it's progress, right, Grant? It's progress.
I just want to mention just one thing about who we're up against, and that was Dick D'Amato, who was the lawyer for the Senate Appropriations Committee. When the Lazar story broke in '89, the head of the Appropriations Committee said, "Are we doing UFOs at Area 51? Because if we are, we're paying for it, and we don't know what the hell's going on." And he sent Dick D'Amato all over the place to Area 51 to find out. Dick D'Amato then went to Jesse Marcel Jr. and said, "I just want to let you know this is all true. There's a deep, deep, dark part, an unelected part of the government that controls this. They've got the stuff." And this is Dick D'Amato was the guy that went to Stephen Greer and said, "I just want to let you know you're up against the varsity team of all black budget programs. Be careful."
Well,
good
that's
luck.
why we're out here. That's why we're gaining momentum. That's why we're gaining numbers. That's why Neil's doing the Portal to Ascension, Ultimate Star Being Conference, because we are rising in numbers. This is a people's movement, like, you know, Black liberation, women's liberation,
Yeah.
all those. It started with the people, ending the Vietnam War. It started with the people. So it's us. We're the ones. Right?
Yeah,
So
so it's not just a good idea. There's a lot of good ideas like solving childhood cancer, but as you said, we're no different than any other social political movement. We have to push the thing. Just because it's a good idea doesn't mean everybody has to adopt it. We have to push the issue and make it and force it out there.
I want to thank everyone for what everyone's doing here. Carolyn, what's coming up for you? Anything?
Of course. Oh my God, so much stuff, especially with how we left off with this last movie with the classified thing. So of course we're going to follow up on that. So I have a few productions in the works.
Rent a Tear in the Sky. It's a great film. You can even look at the trailer, but I recommend getting it. Michael, you have a big weekend coming up, November 12th. Unmute yourself. We don't want to miss any of it. Okay.
So if you want a great weekend, a great Saturday, in person at the Academy of Medicine, 103rd and 5th in Manhattan, or free online streaming and YouTube, and come and hear Ralph Blumenthal talk about the latest that he's discovering through his New York Times research. Come and hear Harvard-Smithsonian astrophysicist Rudy Schild, who brings together a new view of the universe and our place in it, bringing in a lot of the things we're talking about tonight. And 3 cosmic energy weather engineers who have really important work they've been doing. It's not theoretical. They've been doing this work and they've been getting very good results with a technology that could buy us a lot of time and save us a lot of grief with global warming, climate change, desertification. And then Trish and I are giving the overview of it, what our project, the next step is about the mass-free cosmic primordial energy that's the underlying unity, really, of our existence. And it's a conference unlike any you'll go to, and so I hope you'll join us.
Yeah, great. Thanks for being here tonight. And I'll be at the conference. I'm really excited. And Michael is the mindshiftinstitute.org. There's under events, you can see and register for this weekend. Melinda, what about you?
My goodness, a couple of things I'm involved in that I think you can expect before the end of the year. I just a week ago was taping a TV show with Gaia Television Network. Many of you probably are very familiar with Gaia, and it's a new TV show with radio host Jimmy Church, and it's called Into the Vortex. And I'm very, very, very honored to have been one of the first people in the first season of tapings. Everyone on there, familiar names that you guys will all know, like Linda Moulton Howe and Billy Carson, etc., Geraldine Roscoe, etc. So here I taped a show with them where I'm talking about Wilson Davis, Shannon Houck, and that whole story, kind of like I did today. And Grant, you'd be proud of me for doing it right. Your name was dropped a lot. Anyway, so that should air before the end of the year, and so I'm excited about that. I'm in a new documentary that's about to come out called Accidental Truth, made by a couple different researchers in the field, and so that's kind of exciting. So there we go. I have my tours every night and readings every day here in Sedona, Arizona, and yeah, so those are kind of the main things. I'm not involved in this, but I want to make a quick plug for James Ziandoli and J. Christopher King, and the conferences that they're doing in New York are phenomenal. And they have another one coming up on December, I think it's off the top of my head, I think it's December 8th. What? 8th, yeah. And you guys, I highly recommend it. I'm actually considering attending, but at the very least, I'll be watching it online. I haven't made a definite decision yet.
The last one was great with Gary Nolan.
Yeah,
And,
yeah. And the
um,
next one will have Christopher Mellon and Ralph
and Whitney
Blumenthal and some
Krieger,
others,
yeah.
and Leslie Keane talking at it. So it's going to be a phenomenal event.
Thank you. If you're in Sedona, check out Melinda's Sky Watch with night vision glasses. Okay.
It's
and
called UFOsightingtours.com. There you go. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you. Thank you. Osvaldo, what are you up to? What's
Oh, wow. Okay, well, I'm
stalking
doing,
Kristian Gillibrand? Are you
I'm doing a lot of stuff. I'm doing a lot of things. You can keep up with what I'm doing directly on my Twitter account at the Disclosure Revolution with Osvaldo Franco. I'm going to be launching a YouTube channel with a mini doc that I've been working on for quite some time with some theories and some proof of these theories. You can also check out the stuff that we're doing at the Orb Research Bureau with the app. That I got a lot of stuff going on that we're doing.
where can we check out the Orb research? Where can we do
We
that?
have a Twitter account. We also have we're up in the App Store as well. Orb Research Bureau.
Orb Research Bureau.
Also, you also should check out the work that my collaborator Patrick Jackson is doing at Quantum Paranormal. We've got a lot of stuff going on, and there's a lot of things I'm not talking about at the moment, but really exciting stuff.
Talk to me about it when you can talk about it.
100%. Like, listen, this is not a forever. I can't talk about this. Is like a couple months, we're going to have a nice discussion. You know, I will be much more of an open book when I can be. We're trying to cross our T's and dot our I's, make sure everything goes well. And that's basically it. You can keep
We'll be in touch. We'll be in touch and keep in touch with Grant. And Grant, you just wrote a book, and what's the name of that book again?
I got the Alien Sky Pilot book. That's the one that's the consciousness interface with the craft and how they move the craft around and how everybody tells the same story and the oneness and the craft is alive and all that kind of stuff. And I have a book coming out shortly on apports and manifestations, which deals with in all the fields, psychics, physical mediums, UFOs, where stuff moves around or falls out of the sky or stuff, you know, stuff like that. So I'm doing a book. I think it's one of the first books ever done on that phenomena. So that's coming out maybe within a month.
Well, thank you,
Very
Errol.
cool.
Thank you all for being here. And you see this movie, definitely it's worth seeing. And there's so much happening. It's every day there's another kind of drop that's dropping the disclosure movement. And these people, Melinda's tracking it day by day.
Yeah, we're supposed to have the public document, the classified one that just went to Senate Congress. We're supposed to get the public one any minute. Everybody, you know, wait, that'll be interesting what we're hearing, what's been leaked. I won't go into great detail, but we are hearing that it's 366 total cases, 22 pages long was classified. We don't know how big the public one will be, but they are saying, while they are saying in it, half of them are explained, they are saying, and I think it's important to focus on this, half of them out of 366, that's a lot, half of those accounts, and these were from military and intelligence people to the UAP task force. Anyways, half of them are unexplained. And so the report's coming.
They can't be extraterrestrial. Is there always their line? Oh, it's unexplained.
Well, no, they're saying they're fully, you know, unexplained and do things that meet the 5 observables. So that suggests very advanced technology that's not from here. Well, so I don't know what they're going to say till the report comes out. Everyone's, you know, armchair quarterbacking. I tell everyone, wait for patience.
That it's extraterrestrial.
Wait to rip each other apart till we actually get the report.
Well, they're always saying there's no proof it's extraterrestrial. I would say it is actual proof it's extraterrestrial if it's not made by any country, any, you know, technology we know.
Hence the significance of Wilson Davis, because that says that.
Right. Okay. Let's go back to our hosts, Neil Gar and Joan of the Angels. So Neil, how are we doing on what's our next?
We're good. So
Thanks,
we're closing out here.
everyone.
Carolyn, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was a blast. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Neil,
Yes,
for hosting
Alan,
us. Thank you.
Neil. Thank you so much for doing this, and I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Thank you.
Right. Thank
Thank
you.
Hey, thanks,
Thank you,
Michael.
Alan. Thank you, Neil.
Man,
Yes.
thank you, Michael.
Yeah.
Osvaldo.
Yeah.
And just to let you know, bye guys.
Melinda, please get in touch with me. It's very important.
Yeah,
I'll do
I'll
that.
put you in touch with Melinda, okay?
Yes,
Thank
and
you.
Grant,
Thank you,
please.
Alan,
I have
please.
Something I
Yeah,
would like.
Michael,
Give him my phone number, please.
I will.
Please,
I
yes,
will.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
And
What-
just to let you guys know, Carolyn will be at the Starbeams conference over the next few days, and she'll be at the San Diego event. So if you want to come, hang out with her in person, ask her some questions, she'll be there.
No,
And I just want to say
Carolyn
this
is
real
really-
quick. Let me talk about the panel real quick. Or you want to talk about Carolyn, then I'll
No,
get
I
into
just
the
want to say she's really brilliant because the movies just have it, but she has a whole understanding of grid work and brain consciousness technology, and it's really cutting edge. But
Well,
what
her
were you gonna
other
say?
documentary, Superhumans, really
Yeah.
goes into that, right? The science of the fact that we're like some magical avatars.
What were we going to say about the panel
I
here?
was going to say that was extremely high level panel. A very, very high level. I can't even count how many UFO disclosure panels we've done, but I really feel this is evolution. Thank you guys so much because there's so much happening right now. And we were talking about the relevant information, plus the data that Carolyn Corey has freshly collected, So I love it. And I would say that the biggest takeaway is can't wait for any external validation. We are disclosure, and we just got to keep moving forward. So Alan, masterful as always, brother.
It's fun. I'm so passionate about this, from the experiencers to I say it's offense and defense. The defense is the government defending it, and the offense is the experiencers moving the energy out into the cosmos. So both sides are really dynamic in this interplay. It's like a dance, And what else is there to really put your passion into except something unknown, mysterious, that stimulates all our intellectual capacities and yet still remains a mystery? I mean, right, Melinda? It's probably the most exciting thing we can all think about. And I mean, that's why I'm in the. So what's coming up next, Neil?
Okay. So we're going to go ahead and close the stream off on all the socials in a few moments here. And then I'm going to play, I was interviewed earlier today, so I'm going to play the interview video on Debbie Dabinshire, I believe is her name. Yeah,
Great.
so I was on her show today for Conscious Life Expo, doing a little plug for CLE and for other things we're doing. So I figured, we'll take a little hour break. I'll play that, and then we'll come back for the What is the Universe/Multiverse panel.
And who's on that panel?
We got Adam Apollo, Geraldine Orozco. Let me see. Sorry, Michael White was going to be on it, but he can't make it. Shreya, it's late for her, so she gave me a 10-minute video. So we're going to start out with, Shreya's video. And then we have also, let me see here. Then we have you, Alan.
I'm on that, yes. And I also want to, thanks. We'll do that. I also want to plug my book, Making Contact. You can get it on Amazon. Ask for it at Barnes & Noble. Thank you, Melinda. And it's an overview of everything we've been talking about the last couple of hours. And then I'm writing another one that's even going to go further into the unknown. So thank you, Oswald. Keep up the good work. Let us know any developments with Kristian Gillibrand. Melinda, thank you. Joan, always good to see your face. Okay, let's
move along.
All right, see you in 50 minutes, Alan.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, all right, stopping the live stream. So closing the official live stream, all the channels right now. Again, to everybody on all the YouTubes and Facebooks, we are going live again in 50 minutes. So if you want to tune in, youtube.com/portals to ascension or youtube.com/new realities. And the next panel is, what is the universe/multiverse? Is it holographic? What are we? What is the paradox? How many universes are there? We're going to be exploring these questions. And so if you have some questions too, because we're going for 2 hours for this one. So if you have any questions in regards to this, if something comes up, please do share it. So now I'm going to switch off this and we're going to just be in the Zoom room for a little bit. So live stream switching off. Love you all tuning in on the live stream.